Welcome to meeting number 6 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. La réunion d'aujourd'hui se déroule selon
Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application.
Before we continue, I'd like to ask all in-person participants to consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. You will also notice a QR code on the card which links to a short awareness video. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, the bottom of your screen, you'll find that you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best as we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding. Pursuant to Standing Order 106, subsection 2, and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September 23rd, 2025, the committee is meeting on the study of Canada's Arctic strategy. I would now like to welcome our witness for the first hour, Dr. Jessica Shadian, President and Chief Executive Officer of Arctic 360. Welcome. Up to 5 minutes will be given for your opening remarks, after which we will proceed with rounds of questions from the members. Go ahead. Merci.
Thank you, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. Arctic 360 is Canada's national Arctic think tank. Our mission is to elevate Canada's national conversation about our North and the Arctic region, and to provide an inclusive and coordinated platform for Canada to engage in Arctic discussions around the world. The question today: does Canada's Arctic foreign policy ensure GAC is fit for purpose in the Arctic? In a word, no. The AFP was a late reaction to a fundamentally changed world. 15 years ago, the Chinese ambassador to Norway gave an Arctic Council reception speech before a balcony of onlookers explaining the Arctic's importance for China's national interest, wrapped in a climate science bow. So this is not new. Yes, for over a decade, Russia has modernized its Arctic infrastructure and military capabilities to develop resources and control regional access. My simple question: why aren't we doing the same? Our allied Arctic neighbors also spent the past decade modernizing Arctic infrastructure and developing resources. The AFP says, quote, safety, security, and defense of the Canadian Arctic comprise a fundamental priority for the government of Canada. Then why is our North not safe, insecure, and underdefended? True, it is not in Canada's strategic interest for the Arctic to become a theater of military conflict, but reality prevails. We need to be prepared, we're not. So what is new? The U.S., quote, Canada's closest partner and ally in the Arctic, continues its efforts to take Greenland. The 51st state could be seen as tongue-in-cheek. Is it? The U.S. Department of Energy recently acquired 5% equity stake in Canadian company Lithium Americas, followed by a White House announcement that DoD is taking 10% equity stake in Canadian Trilogy Metals, with aims for another 7%. The U.S.-Ukraine Reconstruction Partnership Fund gives the U.S. 50% of royalties, license fees, and payments from minerals, hydrocarbons, and related infrastructure development projects, and first choice to acquire them. The Armenian-Azerbaijan Transit Corridor, a U.S. 99-year lease, aims to develop energy, critical infrastructure, and digital technologies. The Northwest Territories Fortune Minerals already has received U.S. Pentagon funding. And this is just all aside from China. Canada calls for pragmatic diplomacy. I argue for serious, purposeful, strategic diplomacy. As the second largest Arctic nation and longest Arctic coastline, abundant resources, robust democratic institutions, and settled Indigenous land claims, Canada's Arctic soft power and strategic diplomacy are indispensable. What the AFP did get right, it was co-developed with Northerners. Now, Arctic diplomacy needs to proceed accordingly. appointing an Arctic ambassador, and opening consulates in Anchorage and Nuuk. They are fundamental levers of strategic diplomacy. Now they need the mandate to carry out a serious, coherent, purposeful strategic Arctic foreign policy. So recommendations. 1, the AFP should reflect the new government's central mission for Canada to be strong on defense and strong on the economy. 2, continued commitment to the Arctic Council is fundamental. However, it cannot be prioritized over today's serious geopolitical realities. 3, our steadfast commitment to the rules-based international order is laudable and important, but we need additional means to engage so as not to meet the fate of the band that refused to stop playing as the Titanic toppled and sank into the iceberg-laden sea.
Monsieur le Président, juste petite question de
Chair,
règlement.
just a point of order, please. So for my interpreter friends, I want them to be able to make it to the end of the meeting, so if we could ask the witness to speak just a little bit slower, it will give them some breathing room, please.
4, engaging in Arctic forums. A decade late is better than never. We need to do strategic diplomacy. Track 1.5 and Track 2 diplomacy are essential levers of strategic diplomacy. Our Arctic neighbors support their Arctic think tanks, using them as levers to promote their Arctic policy interests on the world stage and to conduct 1.5 track diplomacy offstage. Canada needs to show up and be serious on international Arctic stages, alongside foreign affairs ministers, defense ministers, heads of military, and even prime ministers. The same should apply at home. For the past 5 years, our annual conference has hosted all Arctic states, plus European and Asian state ambassadors, high commissioners to Canada. We've yet to have a major foreign affairs or defense minister deliver remarks. 7, programming. The only Arctic program is GALI. It focuses on the Arctic Council, Indigenous Northerners, youth, and University of the Arctic. Yes, we should fund Arctic Council activities, but it should not be the only arena of our foreign policy. We must keep Indigenous youth in our foreign policy efforts. It must not be our foreign policy. Programming must support Track 1.5 and Track 2 Arctic diplomacy and leading Canadian Arctic think tanks and institutions to position Canada as an Arctic leader and grow Canada's soft power and diplomatic standing.
Apologies, Chair. I want us to be able to respect our interpreters, and I respect our witness, but we need to be sure that interpreters can interpret. It's too fast.
That problem. And I'm supposed to do it really quickly, so.
Mr. Chair, you might give her 1 extra minute.
Sure.
Okay, then,
because we only have one
that's
point of order.
That will help me.
Because we only have one witness, I think her topic is very important.
Yes.
I'd like to hear it. So let's just let her give a little bit more time because there's only one.
Sure.
Do I need to repeat anything, or is it okay? Oh. That was a dry run through. Okay.
Just the last minute.
Yes, I will. Okay. Programming must support Track 1.5 and Track 2 Arctic diplomacy and leading Canadian Arctic think tanks and institutions to position Canada as an Arctic leader and grow Canada's soft power and diplomatic standing in the region. 8, research. We need an Arctic science policy fit for purpose, not only to study climate change, but also applied research to address it, namely cold weather innovations spanning everything from NORAD to housing, for Canada and for export. As Northerners say it best, they do not want to just survive, but to thrive. My comments come in the hopes that, well, Canada survives, but also thrives, with success measured when the North and Northerners are prosperous, secure, and defended. Thank you. Happy to repeat anything.
Your remarks. I will now open the floor for questions, beginning with MP Ziad Abul Taif. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and merci beaucoup to our witness today. You've mentioned many areas, or you touched on so many areas as far as the Arctic. It gave me the impression that we're lagging behind a lot on the Arctic approach, and that the strategy or the policy in place, I'm not sure, seems like we're struggling to even implement. So I would like to hear your opinion on how can the policy be implemented and what should be the government priorities in order to achieve the result that we're aiming all to have.
Yes, thank you. I think that's where we get into this issue of, and it relates back to being strong on the economy and strong on defense. Critical infrastructure is just hands down. We can't do anything without the infrastructure there. And so there is now effort, we see in the defense policy update, to look at things from a multi-purpose infrastructure perspective. And the federal government is paying attention. What I think is not known at this point is how we're going to fund some of these big projects. They're enormous. They're going to cost a lot of money. And so how is that going to happen? But I also think we are not talking about it with the right lens, in the sense that we need to be future-proofing. So we need to have our infrastructure censored, embedded with AI, and be able to then meet kind of this next generation of transportation infrastructure. And so I don't even know if those are in the discussions yet. And this gets into this piece where, well, could this be part of the return on investment? Because we should be world leaders in cold weather innovations. And we're not. We've got non-Arctic and Arctic states that are far ahead of us. And this is where we have, I think, a lot of potential to contribute. And cold weather innovations run everything, as I was saying, from, NORAD to smart ports and fiber cables and what have you. And so I think we just need to figure this out. We need to wrap our head around, and this takes coordination, right? So I feel that a lot of things are kind of sitting all over the place in different buckets and piles with different conversations taking place, but they are all leading back to the same conversation, and we need to better coordinate how we do these.
Yeah, we are behind, of course, on the policy, while other countries, some Arctic nations, some non-Arctic nations, been very aggressive, building their own icebreakers, their own submarines, and everything they need to probably have more interest or bigger interest and influence on the Arctic. And to that, we need to look back at Canada and see what is the timetable look like for our plan. Do you have any idea? Have you tried to even, you're a think tank, and you must have done some research, or probably look at, what's behind the scene of the timetable to implement our project. You mentioned that the money has to be there, which is obviously you cannot do anything without money, or investment has to come, or we have to build infrastructure. That means we have to build communities around the areas, more than the 130,000 people that we have up there. So among all that, do you see a timetable in place that to be able to implement, as I said, what we need to do?
Well, we need to be strategic, and so we need to figure out what our plan is first before we can have a timetable for anything. For about, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years, several of us from Arctic 360, we've been shopping around with the federal government. We have it already. We're trying to put together an interactive mapping tool that would basically first inventory the transportation, energy, and telecommunications infrastructure that we have, because it doesn't sit in one space, it doesn't sit in one entity into itself, but also then try to overlay that with proposed projects that are being named but also not named, and trying to look at also then you put that in the context also then of kind of social infrastructure gaps, defense needs, and then we can look at it from a strategic position in which then you can actually compare and look, well, because what is also an issue here is that you can't just build an energy project without then having telecommunications, because you need to have fiber. So in order for to have energy secure, you need the grids need to be secure. So everything is interrelated. Even if you're going to build a base in the north, and even if there's only 10 people that come, well, that requires more water, more energy, more telecommunications.
Yeah, we agree. But to all that has to have a timetable somehow, so we can, things can coordinate. So we can't, let's say, ask for more populated area without having housing. We can't ask for housing if there's no economy to basically give the jobs needed.
Yeah.
So all that interconnect in many ways, and that's how you build economies. That's how you build strategies. Where are we from that, and how far are we?
I don't think we're anywhere near that. And so, I mean, this is where the interactive mapping tool is what we think will be very helpful, because then policymakers, institutional investors and others can start looking and saying, you know what, actually, if we go with this first, this is a good one, this will unlock this and create a pipeline of projects that will help enable that. And this, we need, this has not been mapped out or thought through. And so, right now, we're still looking at everything, and this is where it is. There's been so little money that everyone kind of competes for federal dollars for their own project, which they're all important. So we just need to figure out how to make them strategic. What do we need first? We can't get this wrong. I'll just say that, because this, as I say, this will just prove every naysayer
Thank
right.
you. Thank you very much. We'll go next to MP Anita van der Belt. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your testimony and all of the work that you do. You spoke about science and research and the need to be applying some of that, and I think you referred to things like smart ports. Where could we be doing more with things like artificial intelligence, with all of the innovative things, green energy? What would be your guidance in terms of what more we could be doing to utilize all of that?
Taking advantage of our cold weather like our Arctic neighbors have. I can't find more information, but there's this new Borealis kind of research entity, and it will focus on frontier technologies, and this is AI, robotics, quantum, all these things. I think this should be, not just to its name, I think it should be located in the north. I think we should be figuring out these big, answers to these big hard questions and innovating out of our north. Because if you can do it in the north, you could do it everywhere. But we need to do it in the north, most predominantly. And so when you're thinking about, exactly, so cold weather technology, we need to have resilient structures to resist to permafrost. And this goes to housing. But then this goes all the way to what we need for NORAD modernization. And so we need to kind of take a page from our Nordic Arctic partners in how they view and understand their north. It's considered for them kind of their future. They're doing big innovative research and development. I also think once we get there, we need to figure out how to make it Canadian IP. And a big piece of this the other day, of course, we really need to talk about data sovereignty. So, because all of this smart technology requires a whole lot of data. But again, databases do well in cold weather. But this requires fiber cable. So, there's there's so much opportunity. And, we just need to have that will and motivation to just kind of be a bit, it's not even taking a risk. It's doing more akin to our Arctic neighbors, yeah.
How would we make sure that that research, that science, that application is Indigenous-led, particularly given we had testimony last time that there are international research institutes that are coming with foreign nationals doing research in ways that are not respectful of some of the Inuit and local communities. How do we make sure, first of all, that when we are doing that the very innovative science, that it is Indigenous-led, and then how do we deal with those that are coming from outside to ensure that they are also embedding the same kind of culture and values?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, why not make CHARS a hub? And then you're going to get the best and the brightest from Canada going up north, working with northerners. You're going to get, attract private capital to the north. We need to be thinking along those innovation lines, then, you go to where the northerners are. And but all this, there's so many interconnections, is what I'm saying, like steel and how it interacts with permafrost, right? That can be social infrastructure all the way to defense technologies. And so I think there's an opportunity. We just, but we build hubs everywhere else, and we don't think, that's what I'm saying, we often just think we should be studying climate change, and that's why we go to the north, but it's actually a really big opportunity. In terms of the international, research, international researchers coming to Canada, as I, understand, they're federal grants, but they also, like in Nunavut, has to go through the Nunavut research board, and so there has to be approval there. I don't know, and so I'm speaking with not enough knowledge, but how closely the federal government and, let's say, the Nunavut Research Board work together, because I think northerners themselves are very concerned and they want to make sure that they're keeping their north safe. And so how do we kind of triangulate that with some of like the federal departments to help make sure?
And I mean, I really appreciate your testimony talking about where there is so much opportunity, things that may not be currently thought of front of mind. We also have opportunity now that there is an ambassador. So where do you think the focus and, if you were to give direction about what that ambassador could be doing and taking advantage of that position? I know there's not a lot of time left, but if you could just give us some of your views on that.
No, and I'm very excited. I think Virginia Marin is going to be really great. And this is what we're missing. So we go to these international conferences, and there's security conferences, there's Arctic conferences, what have you. And every time you'll have then like the whole stage filled. First, maybe with a minister of foreign affairs or the defense minister or even a prime minister, and then they're talking with the other counterparts. Or, though you'll see many times, then like a stage, then it's like, let's say just one country, and then so you have the minister of foreign. I mean, this is what we'd look so good if we would do this. Like, let's say you have a minister of foreign affairs, and then we have our ambassador, but also then we bring, the territorial premiers and like ITK, and then we just show up in force, and we're like Team Canada, and like this is us, and this is who we are as an Arctic nation, and this is what we're doing, and we're not only not strategic, but oftentimes we're not there. It was excellent to have Mary Simon a couple years ago at a big conference, and that was great. But also we send the wrong ministers often with domestic agendas and not foreign affairs portfolios. I don't know how much time, so I don't want to. How much time?
We're done. Sorry.
Thank you for that. We'll go next to MP Mario Simard. Vous avez 6 minutes.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to give you the time to plug your earpiece in.
Pas de souci.
Oui.
Oui. Merci.
Thank you very much. Are you hearing the interpretation now? Perfect. Thank you for your presentation. You focused on infrastructure. Historically, Quebec has developed the northern region because there were financial reasons to tap into resources. So often there are developments in the north in order to access mineral resources or energy resources. And so this could be a short-term solution for developing infrastructure. I say this because I know that the government would like to develop strategic critical minerals further. In the Canadian North, there are a lot of strategic critical minerals, but what's lacking is the infrastructure for these mining projects. We spoke to different indigenous groups, including a coalition that focuses on main projects, and I was wondering if you have looked into infrastructure that would be needed for the development of natural resources and potentially models that could work for Indigenous people, perhaps First Nations with some support could work on that infrastructure, and I would like to know what you think on the infrastructure that would be needed for natural resource development in the north.
Thank you. I think this is a larger question, in fact. So it's not just infrastructure, but I guess maybe the upside is we need to build new supply chains. I've learned a lot from listening to really smart people, and what I have learned is that we are not going to we need to create a new critical minerals economy, and that can't just even happen with Canada alone, much less in the north. And this is going to have to be done purposeful and coordinated with our allies that we'd like to work with. And this comes to everything from, so there's two pieces of it. It comes from everything, and infrastructure is a big part of this, but it gets wrapped up into the whole discussion, is we need to have, the entire supply chain identified from the mine to the offtake market. We need to be, have a guaranteed price. I've also learned that, so there is a lot of, potential critical mineral mines in, that are Canadian led and proponents of, and I would say on that end, a lot of Indigenous and Northerners are the ones that are proponents. So the way forward on that is equity ownership, I think, outright. But the fact is that there are a lot of junior mines. It's kind of dominated by junior miners, and junior miners are going to have a hard time getting the financing they need. And so what I've been understood is that when you identify, and this is where we need to work concertedly with our partners and figure out and identify what those supply chains are, you need to have a whole supply chain from the mine project, all the way to the offtake market identified up front, because then that becomes an investable project for pension funds, because that's the kind of patient capital that's required, but then it kind of feeds in with the venture capital, because a lot of this stuff takes new technologies and information. And so I think we need to have a bigger plan. And so I don't think the North is going to be able to succeed on this on its own and figure out the infrastructure, gaps. I mean, this is something that needs to be kind of a national effort. There are a lot of proposed projects in the North, again, led by, Northerners themselves. So, and as I understand, there is now some discussion about how we do this. But this is the only way, because otherwise then China's going to continue to, flood the market and keep prices low, and we won't be able to compete, essentially, with that market. So.
Merci. En lien
Thank
direct avec ce que vous venez de dire,
Coming back to what you
récemment,
just said,
moi, j'ai entendu parler,
recently,
peut-être que vous pouvez nous éclairer là-dessus,
and perhaps you
d'une
can
volonté
clarify,
des pays
but
de l'OTAN à
NATO
mettre en place
countries
un
have
prix
stated
plancher pour
they're
certains.
interested in putting in a basic price for certain critical minerals. You can also raise the volume. There's a button.
So
Oui, est-ce que ça fonctionne?
Are you hearing me now? So I'll start my question over, no problem. I was saying that I've heard that there were talks for certain critical minerals to have some basic costs, because there's China that controls the market for certain rare soils, and Canada could do something similar, but it requires infrastructure. But is this something that you think is probable, that NATO countries will agree on this price for certain strategic critical minerals? Is this something that's probable?
I think it's something that a lot of the NATO allies want to have happen, because we need it for NATO technologies. And also, if you look at a lot of the, from the EU to the Nordic countries, they are very, they're eager and going after working out how to create a new critical minerals economy. But they also know that this is not, there has to be something coordinated because of the price, and you're just going to have to just take that in. But at the same time, so I don't know, maybe that's stockpiling or how you want to look at it. But these are the kind of efforts and real strategic kind of means that we're going to need to take in order. Otherwise, we're just going to keep talking about our opportunity, and it won't be realized. And so I think there will be a lot of. I think there are already a lot of our NATO allies who are going in this direction, and they have strategic, kind of partnerships with a lot of different countries to kind of help build that out. So.
Merci.
Thank you very much. We will now proceed with more questioning, going to MP Rood.
Thank you very much for being here today. You've made it incredibly clear that Canada is not prepared to meet the threat that Chinese and Russian expansions mean for Canada and our north. So I just wanted to ask, in your opinion, should Canada be establishing a permanent base to increase our Arctic military presence year-round? And if you could expand on what would a year-round base need on day one and over the next 10 years to meet today's threats and future-proof against tomorrow's?
So I think there are decisions that will be several bases put in the north, but that's only one piece. So I think then, so we're going to have a lot more, we're going to have a lot more assets and people in the north that way, so that would be a really big help. But again, we're getting back to the infrastructure thing. So we got to figure out then how we're going to have the, adequate energy, telecommunications, water, all the surrounding infrastructure. I mean, there's a housing crisis in the north. There is a housing crisis in the north as well, and so we just need to think, I think, more holistically. And I've said it in the past, I definitely do not think that trickle-down infrastructure, if we do the defense infrastructure, it'll all just kind of fall into place for communities. But I don't think that's necessary to even think that way. If we think in a multi-purpose fashion, we are going to be addressing, and we're strategic, we would be able to address the economic and the defense and the social infrastructure needs together. And so I would just say that, yes, bases are important, and I think there's others to defer to as to where they should go and what a year-round presence would look like that know much more than I do. All I will add to that is that it's one piece.
So beyond buildings, you say infrastructure, so beyond buildings and kit, is there any continuing supports that might be required then to keep pace with, let's say, Finland and Norway and the United States, so that a base up in the north would stay mission ready and be able to be interoperable year round?
I mean, I'm sure it could be operable year round, but kind of with, what kind of, with money, but also what kind of technologies, So, I mean, we do not have, parts of the north do not have any fiber cable. And I'll just add out there that, there's a few projects already that allied neighbors, but are looking to build an undersea fiber cable that stretches all the way from Japan to Europe. So, and it needs to be censored, needs to be smart. We need to see what's going on under the water, monitor things, and so forth and so on, and provide very fast communications. So, so we can focus on one thing, but we also need to focus on everything else at the same time.
So, two very loaded kind of final questions then. What do we need to do to meet the current threat environment, and what do we need to do, as you said, to future-proof ourselves, because right now we're seriously lagging behind?
We need to have a very good grasp on what next-generation transportation technologies look like. And not just technologies, but infrastructure. And then, so what do we need to do that? And I think when it comes to the north, there's an extra layer of building things and operating in cold weather environments. And so, I mean, if we just make that almost the focus, it's gonna kind of unlock everything else, all the other pieces that surround us. And so I don't know, we're still stuck at trying to figure out if we could build one deep water port and where it would be. I just don't think we're talking about the north with the kind of sophistication we need to be talking about the north with.
So on that note, how do you think the newest Chinese and Russian heavy icebreakers change the threat posed to Canada? So what foreign threat scenarios would worry you most? And where do you think Canadian technology, how does it now match or beat these capabilities?
Yeah, so when it's for China, I had said the other day, it's not future-proofing, it's today-proofing, right? So, I mean, they're already kind of using these, like, AI embedded sensor technologies. And so I don't know how we can even, compete. We need to know what's going on under our water. So we need the submarines, and then there's also, automated piloting going on under the water to do detection as well. But we really do need fiber cable as well. And so, that's one piece, that's under the water, and to figure out what's going on under the water. And we are working on building icebreaker ships. So, I don't know, we can't like create like a ship to address
Thank you so
China
much.
out of
Appreciate
nowhere.
your
So.
time.
Thank you very much. We now go next to MP Bill Blair. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Shadian, very good to see you again.
You too.
I'd like to follow up a little bit on the question that Ms. Rood asked. There's a number of different concepts about how to actually establish a stronger Canadian military presence in the north. One of the things that we've heard very clearly from the military, their concept of operations is not to build one base in essentially what is 40% of Canada's entire landmass, because of the challenges of traversing that territory and getting to any place really would isolate that base. But the military concept of operations, as I understand it, is a number of what we call Northern Operational Support Hubs spread right across the Arctic. And I recall very well in the spring of last year when there was a suggestion perhaps of building a base in Iqaluit. And I went to Iqaluit, and I spoke to the Premier, and I spoke to the Mayor, and a number of people there. And they were, quite frankly, reeling from the idea, because they said, you know, for them, it requires a significant investment in infrastructure. And that didn't just mean a military base, but it meant things like power generation, fiber optics that you've mentioned a number of times, and you and I have discussed with Madeleine Redford many, many times. But it's also things about deep water ports, power generation, water treatment, sewage treatment, healthcare and education facilities, housing, a whole litany of investments that needed to be made. And so I think in response to that, both in the defense policy update that we brought forward, there was about $220 million for those investments to support those Northern Operational Support Hubs. In the spring, the Prime Minister did announce another $400 million for those infrastructure investments and some very specific projects, which I think are helpful as well, about $94 million for power plant upgrades in Cambridge Bay, Goya Haven, Igulik, and Iqaluit. Another $78 million to improve critical infrastructure related to drinking water, wastewater, stormwater. All of that was informed by people in the north who told us this is what they really need. You know, I think for many of us down south, we think of asserting our sovereignty through submarines and battleships and fighter jets and over-the-horizon radar systems, and those are important components of it. But when I've gone to the north, and I know you know this very well, you alluded to it in your remarks, they're talking about infrastructure that supports not only our security but our prosperity in the north. And that means making sure that we invest in communities. The challenge, and I think Ms. Vanderbilt referenced this, but I'd like your take on it again. The challenge is, how do you really incorporate Indigenous leadership and Indigenous voices in those investments? Because I think can be very difficult if we are not well informed about their perspective on what it takes to live in the north. Then we could make mistakes. And frankly, there's few dollars, even though I've talked about big numbers. That's not a lot of money when we talk about the scale of the investment required. So how do we get this right?
Again, it comes back to coordination, and this is where this mapping project, it comes back to that. I mean, you know, the partners on that are, you know, they range from, you know, we work with NTI, it comes from private sector, from Northerners. This thing is supposed to, and like NTI has done like their infrastructure, you know, gap assessment, right? And so it's supposed to look at all the infrastructure needs and what we have. And so from a social, defense, and economic perspective, we just need to wrap our head, we need to be able to see everything that's there and that's needed. And then we could start prioritizing and being strategic and figuring out how this connects to that and that connects to this. And so how does the base then create water where there's not enough water somewhere else? And where do we put a base? Because there's a base then going to be, you know, in good relationship to a port that's going to go where? And how does it, you know, and ports, of course, then create opportunities for more goods to arrive in the north. And so it's all these, this is it. So I don't know, I don't, in my mind, understand how we're going to accomplish everything we need to accomplish if social infrastructure is over here, critical minerals is over here, the defense discussion is over here. You know, we need to work this out. We just need to get it, and we need to do it quickly. So we need to be very strategic. Maybe the projects office needs to be the one that kind of maps this out.
And I tend to agree with that, and it's one of the reasons we see the clear nexus between defense policy and foreign policy. I think they complement each other they need to be lined up. Another question I have, and I agree that the advent of Sweden, Finland, into the NATO family, the entire Nordic nations, all of the non-Russian Arctic is now a member of NATO. And I think there's a great deal that we can learn from them. But I would also note that some of those countries have not done as good a job in dealing with their indigenous populations as we would aspire to. And so how do we take the best of what they do, but also bring our own values to that?
We have a very different.
Unfortunately, just a very brief response.
We have a very different situation in Canada than we do in the Nordics. The Nordics kind of have, cultural rights. We have real land claims agreements.
Right.
We've got northern, Inuit who own surface and subsurface soils. So it's a very different landscape, and I'll just say that.
Thank you. MP Mario Simard is next. You have 2.5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Juste pour revenir sur ce que
I would like to come back to what you just said on priorities and infrastructure. Earlier in your opening remarks, you talked about transport, telecom infrastructure, energy infrastructure. But to your knowledge, by government or by experts, is there any kind of diagnostic tool to tell us what needs to be done, what priorities there are in the north? Also, I imagine there might be a logical order of things. Infrastructure needs to be built that is linked to energy before telecom infrastructure, for example. So I would like to know if you have an idea of an order of infrastructure that needs to be built.
Well, I would say that transportation, energy, and telecommunications need to be thought together through. And again, I feel like I'm saying the same thing over, but to figure that out, we need to map it out. So, we know, we've heard, and we can continue to listen to and get more information from Northerners themselves on the infrastructure they need, because it's always evolving. We need to identify specifically, and we do have a sense on what we need in terms of building out our economic infrastructure. We know perhaps, quite well what we need on the defense end. And so it's just then the prioritization comes if we can look at it, overlaying, a map that's overlaid, and then you can understand, well, if you build something here, it requires this much energy. It requires this, this kind of telecommunications. It's going to require this much water. And so I don't think until we create some sort of, ability to look at everything and then make a plan from there, and then this is where, what is the one project or two projects that we start, or three at the same time, but that also are going to open up and unlock private capital. It's when you bring private capital in, it becomes, then you have indigenous equity, but they can't shoulder the whole burden of any of these projects on their own. The federal government will be a player in all of this in different areas, but again, they can't burden the projects all on their own, and we're going to need financing, private capital. So, it's kind of like any, countries all around the world have infrastructure strategies. So, and it's a report, it's put together, and it creates a strategy for how they're going to go about mapping out what goes first and when and where, and
Thank
how
you.
this attracts capital. So we just need to put it all together.
Thank you. Thank you
Merci.
very much. Thank you, Dr. Shadian, for your testimony today and for appearing for this important study. That concludes the first half of the meeting. The meeting is suspended. would start by welcoming a witness for the second hour from the Inuit Tapirit Kanatami, President Natan Obed. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this important study. And I now invite you, President Obed, to make an opening statement of up to 5 minutes. Thank you.
Nakumik, thank you very much, Mr. Clerk, or Mr. Chair. I'm Natan Obed. I'm the president of Inuit Tapirit Kanatami. It's great to be here with all of you today. I'm the president of our National Inuit Representational Organization, and our work is directed by our 4 Inuit land claim regions, our treaty rights holding members, including the Nunavut Regional Corporation, Nunavut Tungavik, Makivik, and the Nunatsiavut government. Inuit treaty organizations also advance our priorities internationally through the Inuit Circumpolar Council, the international NGO that represents Inuit across Inuit Nunat, our term for the international Inuit homeland encompassing parts of Chukotka in Russia, Alaska, Canada, and Greenland. Herb Nakamaya, the interim president for ICC Canada, I know addressed you last week, and I hope to build on his remarks to you. Inuit are the foremost experts on the Arctic, and Canada would not be an Arctic state without us. Our homeland, Inuit Nunangat, encompasses 40% of Canada's landmass and 72% of its coastline. We either co-manage the entirety of that space or we own it outright. Our most recent research in partnership with NRCan shows that we also hold 32% of Canada's freshwater resources within our homeland. ITK has consistently advocated for Canada to fulfill its potential as a powerful Arctic state internationally by recognizing the region's enormous growth opportunities and making investments needed to bring it into the rest of the country. Our homeland is the least developed Arctic territory among the 8 Arctic states, despite its enormous potential for economic growth and growing importance as a geopolitically strategic region. For example, Canada is the only Arctic state without a university in its Arctic territory. We experience the highest cost of living in North America due to the lack of federal investment in transportation and related infrastructure. And our people are at greater risk than other Canadians and other Arctic populations for experiencing poverty and human rights violations because of the profound gaps that exist in health, education, and other essential services. It's also important to note that our mother tongue, Inuktitut, while it is an official language in the Northwest Territories and in Nunavut, and an official language of the Nunatsiavut government, is not considered an official language by the Government of Canada, and therefore one of the 13 jurisdictions, provinces and territories in this country, we have an 85% majority population within one of our jurisdictions that has absolutely no right to receive its mother tongue as essential services delivery from the federal government. It is a gap that is profound and one that we hope to change. This past summer, ITK published a paper outlining our vision for sovereignty, security, and defense in the region. We discuss how Inuit contribute to Canada's sovereignty and security, and how continued neglect of the region exposes the country to foreign interference and security threats. Our recommendations provided in the paper focus on, among other areas, the need for Canada to continue engaging in the Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, formed in 2017, which serves as a forum for Inuit and federal leaders to identify and advance shared priorities. This model of diplomacy is unique to Canada among the Arctic states and facilitates substantive cooperation between Indigenous people and the state that is unparalleled in the Arctic and unparalleled internationally. We also focus on the need for Canada to invest more in the health and well-being of our people to retain and support Inuit as the region's future and the most important resource. In addition, we underscore the need for federal budgets to include Inuit-specific investments that enable Inuit treaty organizations to access funding that is intended to benefit our people as opposed to pan-Indigenous allocations or to those targeting provincial or territorial governments. Finally, we emphasize the need for Canada to enact a broader vision for bringing Inuit Nunangat into the rest of the country. Canada's approach to the Arctic continues to be characterized by piecemeal investments that respond to the political priorities of the moment, rather than the types of investments that have transformed other regions of the Arctic into prosperous regions with high standards of living. I look forward to further discussions today. Nakumik.
Thank you very much for your remarks, President Obed. I will now open the floor for questions, beginning with MP Tamara Kronos.
Chair, can we
Yes.
just make sure we assess the fact that we will have a special guest
Yes,
coming?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I believe we have agreement among all members that we will include MP Idlut for 5 minutes at the end of all the members' questions. Are we in agreement? Excellent. So we will begin, as I said, with MP Tamara Kronos. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you very much, Natan, for your testimony. It was very, very interesting. You mentioned that Canada's Arctic is the least developed of all of the Arctic nations that are in the area, and you gave a number of examples in healthcare, on education, on defense, on a number of other areas. And you also outlined the need to include Inuit-specific investments in the budget. I'm wondering what the top three what you think the top three infrastructure priorities should be.
Thanks. Well, through the Inuit Nunangat, or through the Inuit Crown Partnership Table, we have worked with the federal government to identify 79 projects over the next 10 years that total approximately $30 billion that would close the infrastructure deficit between Inuit and the rest of Canada, or our homeland and the rest of the country. Just for example, there's one deep water port across our 51 communities, and all of our communities are either at tidewater in a marine environment or in freshwater adjacent to a marine environment. We in the conversations around nation-building projects, have also identified a number of different key infrastructure, such as the paving of airstrips in a number of our communities that limit the ability for airlines to get goods and services out of our communities, to be able to fly in all types of weather, and ultimately drives up the prices that people pay to travel, but also any goods and services that come into our communities. So those are just two examples of the work that we're trying to do to identify, articulate, and then hopefully solve the infrastructure crisis. The other piece here is housing, and wherever you go across Inuit Nunangat, that's the first thing that you'll hear, is that Inuit and all people who live in our homeland say, we just have a housing crisis. We have 52% overcrowding. So in our pre-budget submission, we've identified roughly 6,500 units that are needed in the next 10 years, over 4,500 units that need to be either improved or funds for operation and maintenance, which will also cost approximately $8 billion. This is the price of being an Arctic state, and also the really troubled history of Inuit colonization in the area, which has led to these systemic barriers for us to be a part of this nation's economy, and also generally to be healthy and live fulfilling lives.
So you mentioned that, and it's sort of obvious that Inuit are the foremost experts on the Arctic, and you talked a lot about what it means to be an Arctic state. And we of course have a government that all parties are committed to, or say that we're committed to reconciliation. I'm wondering, from your perspective, what sovereignty means for Inuit communities and how that might differ from how the federal government sees it. And I'm also wondering if you could compare and contrast Canada's position with respect to the other countries, given the fact that you have this interface with them.
Yes. Well, our modern treaties are really at the heart of the relationship that Inuit have with this country. In United Nations terms, it's our constructive arrangement, and we are proud Canadians, but it isn't by Canada's domination of us. It is by our partnership in this day and age, and our hopes moving forward that we can remain Canadians and that we can have constructive arrangements with this nation state. The challenges that we face here in Canada are very different than, say, in Greenland or in Alaska or in Russia. We are very fortunate that we live in a nation state with free speech and with rule of law and a respect for Indigenous people's rights. The UNDRIP legislation that was passed by the previous government underpins the Section 35 rights that we hold and the broad hope that we can implement our existing rights within the structure of federalism, but also in provinces and territories in which we live. So we immediately think about the implementation of those agreements as the first place that we go when we talk about sovereignty. And what it means to be a Canadian Inuk is also, and what will propel our positively moving and our optimism moving forward, is our ability to live up to the agreements that we've signed and include Inuit as partners in all manners of diplomacy, of governance, and of nation building within our homeland.
So the witness that we just heard before you talked a lot about, we had a good conversation about AI and surveillance and data, and of course the Arctic archipelago is changing and it offers some interesting challenges. I just had the opportunity a few weeks ago to see the vehicle traffic surveillance system in my own community of Nanaimo, and it's pretty incredible the sort of technological advances that are happening. I'm wondering if you could just give a sense of how that Inuit Inuk traditional knowledge and local experience could be more effectively integrated into Canada's Arctic surveillance in order to make it better and more sort of purpose-built for your communities.
Unfortunately, because of the time, I can only allow a very brief response.
Thank you. Well, first we have the Canadian Rangers, who are hopefully going to be more integrated into the larger Canadian forces. But generally speaking, Inuit hunters and harvesters traverse the entirety of our homeland and are the eyes and ears on the ground for surveillance across our homeland. And what we are observing and the concerns that we see, whether it's with ship traffic or with any other non-Canadian presence in our homeland, that is a tangible link to then the first level of defense that we have within our country about how to respond to any foreign threats.
Thank you. We'll go next to MP Rob Oliphant. You have 6 minutes.
Bonus points if I mention the Nanaimo Bar.
Pardon, Monsieur le Président.
Chair, unfortunately, Mr. Oliphant's microphone was not on.
Three things: to flatter you, to ask for your comments, and then to push you. The first one is I would have to say that Inuit Nunavut has benefited from your leadership for 10 years. Everyone's aware of it. Canada has as well. Canada's better when Inuit Nunavut is better. So thank you. I want to talk about the concept of co-development. So that our most recent Arctic strategy had at its core the principle of co-development. When we revised our Arctic foreign policy last year, we kept it. I'm wanting to know what that means to you, to ITK, but also to the Inuit people and Indigenous people, maybe writ large. And has there been a change in the 10 years that you have been in your office?
Well, thank you first for the flattery. I appreciate that. It has been 10 years. I was just reelected for my fourth term, and I'm quite pleased and honored to represent Inuit here in our nation's capital and wherever my job takes me. And so I've seen quite a bit now over the last 10 years and have been working with the Government of Canada over that entire span to ensure that anything that this government considers in relation to Inuit is met with the policy and legislative and program expertise that we feel is necessary in implementing your jobs. Often we come 95% of the way to the federal government in providing advice, clarity, and also cautionary tales about what happens when programs or legislation go awry. Co-development is meant to enhance the ability for Inuit as rights holders to participate in the development of any sort of program or policy or piece of legislation that explicitly affects our rights or affects our standing in Canada. We've done it well and we've done it poorly. In its best, we have things like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the provisions within that were co-developed with the Inuit First Nations and Métis, and an associated action plan, and now we have to get to work on the implementation of it. In the Arctic foreign policy, there's a mention of Action Plan Measure 52, which is cross-border mobilization for Inuit from, especially from Greenland and from Alaska and from Canada, so that we can move across our homeland in a much more seamless way, which would require the amendment of the Immigration Act. We haven't gotten to that piece yet, but successive ministers have talked hopefully about it. Co-development in the space of, say, the Arctic policy can be a bit more frustrating, though, because if there isn't a budgetary link, if there isn't, at the end of the day, ownership of the federal government of the entirety of its Arctic policy, then we are brought into conversations that then end up with us restating our established positions and having expectations that in many cases government is unwilling or even disinterested in meeting. So there were chapters, and provinces and territories had chapters, and Indigenous and rights-holding peoples have chapters, and so there's an Inuit chapter of the Arctic Foreign Policy. I'm sorry, of the ANPF, or the Arctic and Northern Policy. In it, we articulate the ambitions that we have to grow a prosperous Inuit Nunangat, including just even the term Inuit Nunangat, and ensuring that the federal government defines the term in legislation and in policy so it can clearly be used to its fullest extent.
I wanted that one in there. I'm going to interrupt you, though, because I will never not say it, and I encourage our government to. Because we're the Foreign Affairs Committee, I wanted to talk about the participation of Inuit and Indigenous people writ large in foreign affairs fora. The Arctic Council has 6 permanent participants who sit in their own right at the table. When I go to the OAS, you're considered stakeholders. Very different. Can you help push us a little bit on the role that you see Inuit playing in foreign affairs, multilateral bodies, and engaging in a new way?
Yes, the Arctic Council is a very interesting model where Indigenous peoples have permanent participant seats on the Arctic Council. There is still a line between nation states and Indigenous peoples within that particular body. I would love to see in the future there be just clearly articulated peer-based spaces where rights-holding Indigenous peoples and their representatives sit alongside state leadership in outcomes from these types of bodies.
Thank you. We'll have to go to the next member. Monsieur Marius Simard, vous avez 6 minutes.
Merci. Je vais vous...
Thank you, Chair. I'll give you the time to put your earpiece on. Are you hearing the interpreter now? Are you hearing me, Mr. Obed? Is your earpiece working? Are you hearing me now? No.
English. That's the volume.
Ouais. Ça va? Vous m'entendez bien?
Are you hearing the interpreter now? Thank you very much for being with us today. I would like to come back on comments that you made to Mr. Oliphant regarding co-development. You mentioned certain frustrations, and I understand that. You also talked about the Arctic Council, where you participate in, and this reminds me of something from Quebec that you might be aware of, Jean Lavoie, that requires more responsibility regarding things that have an impact in Quebec. I was wondering if you might need more political autonomy. Do you have any asks for the federal government for political autonomy?
I think our asks to the federal government have been more based on respect and structured respect, whether it's how we get into these halls and having passes so we're not seen as visitors to the House of Commons, but we're peers doing work, just like premiers when they come into these spaces. Or whether it's on Canada Day and the Government of Canada presents its ministers and its Prime Minister and its Governor General, but it also decides who speaks on behalf of Indigenous peoples, not the Indigenous peoples ourselves. Or how we are treated when we come to the House of Commons, and the protocols and the processes that are housed within the Speaker's office or within legislation that is housed within Heritage Canada, and also Privy Council is responsible for the rules of orders of precedent. They need to be changed. And that's how we get to true respect of Inuit rights holders in this country, by treating us as a part of the construction of Canada as a nation state, rather than as groups that you have to placate because that's the political norm in this country. We are an essential part of the construction of this country, and not very many parliamentarians or those who enact and implement the rules around the functioning of this democracy care to respect.
Merci beaucoup. Je partage votre avis.
Thank you. I share your beliefs in many ways. Earlier, we were talking about infrastructure development, and that would be necessary. I believe that northern development has two aspects. There's the economic and the infrastructure development, but on the other hand, there's also social and cultural development for Inuit people. And earlier, if I understood you correctly, 85% of essential services offered to your communities are not offered in your official language. I think that you said something like that in your opening remarks. I would like to understand more on essential services. 85% is a shocking number to me. When I talk about essential services, I mean health services, social services. So that means that most of those services are not being offered in the mother tongue, if I understood correctly.
Thank you so much for the question. To clarify, for Inuktitut, our language, I was speaking specifically of Nunavut, one of our 4 jurisdictions, which houses half of our population. But in that particular political jurisdiction, 85% of the Nunavut population are Inuit. The majority mother tongue, upwards to 80% of those people, is Inuktitut. The federal government has no obligation to provide any of its services to any of those people in Inuktitut. So I give that as an example because it's the strongest example that you have in the country of a jurisdiction not respecting the linguistic rights of a majority population. In other parts of Inuit Nunavut, like in Nunavik in northern Quebec, almost 100% of Inuit in northern Quebec, in Nunavik, speak Inuktitut. And again, there is no obligation for the federal government to provide services in Inuktitut to them as well. So these are essential things that we tried to change through the Indigenous Languages legislation, but were unable. There is a 5-year review of that legislation that is coming up, and I do hope that there can be consideration of official language status within our homeland, so we can get beyond this very glaring gap in service.
Very brief question.
Très rapidement, je sais que c'est pas l'objet.
Briefly, I know that this is not the focus of the study of our committee, but if you have any recommendations on language use, I would be more than happy to read them if you could table them to the committee. Thank you.
Very brief response, please.
Thanks. I'll be sure to follow up with you.
Thank you very much. We go to the second round of questioning, beginning with MP Rood. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. How are Inuit organizations leading decisions day to day towards food sovereignty?
Thanks. Well, we have tremendous food insecurity issues. We also have tremendous poverty issues across Inuit Nunavut. We have food insecurity rates upwards to 70%. And we also have median income gaps of approximately 70,000 between Inuit and non-Inuit who live in our homeland. So we have relied on government programming for some of this equity piece. The Nutrition North program has helped, is also challenging in some ways from a social policy lens, but there also are traditional harvesting grants that now are associated with the Nutrition North program that allow for us to harvest healthy, nutritious country food and provide that as a part of food sovereignty or food security within our homeland. We also the transmission of language and culture is also essential in ensuring that our food sovereignty and our food security is met. We know that we have a mixed diet. We know that we need more employment and greater earning levels to be able to fix the food insecurity issue more broadly. We are trying to work with the government on things also like school food programs, so that our children, if they are in food insecure homes, can have food at school and can get them focused on their tasks of the day. So we have a multi-pronged approach. We are involved from the community level all the way up through our national level in either delivering programs or creating strategies for this work.
Are there any other partnerships besides the Government of Canada that are working with you or with the Inuit on food security, and how is success being measured?
There are ad hoc not-for-profit societies that have worked with Inuit communities. Also, the Child First Initiative was being very progressive in the way that it would provide funding for food for Inuit children who were in need of food. That has been drawn back this fiscal year by the Government of Canada. But the ad hoc individual stopgap measures, whether they be from southern-based institutions shipping food up or food centers within Inuit Nunavut, volunteer-run, we know that we need to give them more support. So there are incredible individuals that are helping at food insecurity within our communities, but we have a food security strategy globally, nationally, and we also then need to fill in policy gaps or improve the programs that are existing to ensure that when we spend a dollar, that dollar is spent on those who need it most, and not to line the pockets of for-profit corporations or lost in general administration.
Is there a particular department that your group has been working with to advance the advocacy on food security? And how much money is committed over the next 5 years and to what programs?
Well, we've worked with this government on funds specifically for the school food program, and there were a few different departments that were involved in the implementation of that particular announcement. Generally speaking, though, we don't have the resources that we were looking for. We put pre-budget submissions in for a 10-year solution for food, school food programs, just for one. We generally go to Indigenous Services Canada with a lot of our requests, and they're the ones that we are working with on the Inuit Child First Initiative. So they are the focal point of the federal consideration. But within each of our jurisdictions, our land claim treaty area organizations work with their governments on this issue as well.
Thank you. And just one quick final question. In your opening, you mentioned foreign interference. And so I'm just curious, are foreign actors seeking to influence Inuit and how?
A brief response, please.
This is a much longer conversation, but I would just say through industry and through research and also through social media. There are a number of different ways in which foreign actors have or can influence our populations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next we go to MP Mona Fortier. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again for being here today, and congratulations for your 4th term. We had the privilege of working together during the Inuit Crown Partnership, different meetings when I was President Treasury Board, and I believe that we made some progress, even though I know that there's much more progress that needs to be done. So your leadership is exemplary and very effective, and I know that the next few years will be another opportunity to move that forward. We are undertaking a study on Canada's Arctic foreign policy and related efforts to secure Arctic sovereignty. And I wanted to ask about how we should include, or how we should look at the foreign policy in the sense that, do you have a position paper, or how do we include self-determination of the Inuit into that foreign policy development that we're doing?
Thank you for the question, Mona. We did co-develop the piece specifically around inclusivity in our Arctic diplomacy, and we're very thrilled that the Arctic ambassador has been filled, and Virginia Mearns is a capable and extraordinary person, and I know she'll do well in the role. We also are hopeful that the consulates in Anchorage and in Nuuk can be opened as soon as possible. But there's this overarching principle of inclusion in diplomacy. We are not part of the Canadian state in that I am not a member of the House of Commons, but we are serving the same ends, and we are a part of a nation state and part of the structure of the nation state. So this is something that we spoke quite a bit about within Indigenous peoples' direct interventions at places like the climate change COPs. And I think it's possible for Indigenous leaders to work with Canada on positions and sometimes bring forward nation-state positions on behalf of all Canadians. I think there's a way in which we can reimagine the way rights-holding Indigenous peoples make this nation-state stronger, and on certain things, like Inuit Nunangat, it would only make sense for Inuit leadership to sometimes bring the Canadian position forward to our global counterparts, instead of it being exclusively ministers of the Crown or the Prime Minister. We have an unbelievable advantage in our constructive arrangements with Indigenous peoples in this country. And my plea to all of you is to use it. We want to be helpful. We want to ensure that our nation state is as strong as it can be internationally, and our foreign policy is the most progressive and the most effective, and that can only happen with greater inclusion of Inuit voices.
And if ever you have a position paper or some document that can support that we can have as committee to be able to look at how we can maybe include a recommendation or look into this, it would be very appreciated, and it could guide our report. And another question I wanted to ask is, what role should Inuit organizations play in shaping Canada's relationship with Arctic neighbors like the U.S., Greenland, the Nordic countries? Do you have any response for that?
Well, these are our neighbors and our relatives in many cases. And again, I think Canada has not really considered the tactical advantage to its fullest extent of having a homogeneous society across nation-state borders, and the positive ability for us to work with our separate governments for common interests. So with the Kingdom of Denmark, the tie that binds with us is Greenland, and the policy issues that are essential to Greenlandic Inuit are the same for Canadian Inuit. And there has been by other nation states like Denmark, the willingness to provide Inuit-specific considerations for diplomacy that allow for better relations with other nation states. I would say with the United States as well, and with the connections that we have with Inuit in Alaska, and the work that we've done since the 1970s in the Inuit Circumpolar Council. We can leverage all of that for the nation-state concerns that we have, whether it be in defense or sovereignty or development of the region. We have great opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's my understanding that MP Mario Simard has agreed to provide his 2.5 minutes of questions to MP Lori Idlut. MP Idlut, go ahead.
Koyaname Ixivatare, Koyaname Katimaye Amaru, Koyaname Simard, Ilaw Titawgama Amarutunga Suktipaginatan. Thank you so much to the chair and to the committee, especially to MP Simard for sharing his extra time with me. First, I wanted to congratulate you on your re-election as ITK president, your fourth term as I understand it. You in particular, I think, understand how important it is to represent the Inuit voice. I know that as the MP just for Nunavut, I've heard from so many Inuit from across Canada in Nunavik, in Northwest Territories, as well as Northern Labrador, how I've been their voice as well, being the only Inuk at times in the House of Commons. And I think we share that burden to ensure that Inuit voice is amplified, and I really appreciate the work that you do. My first question to you will be regarding the importance of Inuit mobility across different countries. We know that Inuit, as you've correctly stated, have relations beyond Canada. And I wonder if you could share for us what recommendations you might have to ease the mobility of Inuit between Canada, Greenland, and Alaska so that this federal government can help ensure those relations are remain strong connections.
Nakamik Lori, thank you for those warm wishes, and I'm happy to be working with you again in my new mandate. The first comes from the UNDRIP legislation on the considerations for mobility. It is our right, and the implementation of that right is Canada's responsibility. And for Inuit, we have said that the amendment of the Immigration Act to allow for greater mobility of Inuit between the nation states of Greenland, Denmark, Canada, and the United States is a very progressive and essential part of implementing our existing rights. The net benefit is, well, we just think about where we are right now in world diplomacy. And if we had a functional amended Immigration Act that allowed for greater mobility between three countries, it shows the ways in which we are more alike and the ways in which we have shared respect for one another that then allow for greater conversations to be had for the treatment of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you very much. We will go next to MP Ziad Abul Taif. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Robert, for appearing today. The obvious question is, I know that the community have priorities, and I had a chance to meet with in Denmark, in Copenhagen, with community members from the Greenland and from the north, and I learned a lot about the issues that facing the community, which is an extension of it, or the other way is in Canada. Can you tell us what's the most significant projects that the community have seen in the last 10 years in the north, whether it's infrastructure or whether social, whether otherwise? That would be probably important to know. So please go ahead.
From the social side, the legislation regarding Inuit children and children specifically in care, and the ability for Inuit rights-holding institutions to take greater ownership of caring for our children, that is an incredible positive development. The Inuit Child First Initiative, which is the equivalent to Jordan's Principle, also focused on equity for Inuit children, has given Inuit children a chance when they just didn't have access to before on thousands of different items. From a structural piece, the Government of Canada allowing for, in its budget, Inuit-specific, so distinctions-based funding directly to rights holders for things that are of greatest importance to our communities, like funding directly for housing or for infrastructure, which has allowed for Inuit rights-holding institutions to directly build homes or build essential infrastructure or make partnerships to allow for that to happen, has also transformed the way in which we interact with the federal government and improved the lives of Inuit and improved our communities. We hope that in this new construction of Parliament, a lot of those best practices can be built upon, because there's always room for improvement.
How do you describe the engagement of the community in the affairs of the North? Is it partially, fully? How satisfied of that engagement, and what do you think can be done? What is a wish list for the community to have in order to enhance that further?
Well, we have constructed a democracy that goes from our community level all the way to our international levels. So we hear a lot from our constituents in a rights-based way that's alongside of the provincial and territorial and federal systems. The The major concern that we've heard over the last year is that we do not want this round of militarization or sovereignty exercises in our homeland to mirror what happened in the 1940s and 1950s. We've been through this. Through the end of the World War II and the Cold War era, that's where the American military built over 60 installations across our homeland without a single consideration for Inuit interests. That's when the Canadian government relocated Inuit thousands of kilometers to the north as human flagpoles for Canadian sovereignty. And those are extreme examples, but when we hear Canadian politicians talking ignorantly about what should happen in our homeland, immediately we feel that cannot happen again. We have structured our democracy to interact with yours, and let's use it to ensure that the respect for Inuit rights is upheld throughout this rather than trampled again.
The demographic growth is very important. I can probably agree to that or agree on that. Are you satisfied with the demographic growth in the north among the community? And is anything, if you're not, is there anything can be done? And what you think can be done to enhance that? Because again, without the people, the land is really nothing.
Brief response, please.
Yes. We have a median age of, I believe, 23, so we have a very young population. The challenge that we have is in relation to housing and infrastructure. Many Inuit have to leave. There is no opportunities for housing or opportunities for jobs, and that's part of the development of the region.
Thank you very much. So next we'll go to MP Bill Blair. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And by the way, I don't think I'll require the full 5 minutes. I may share my time with Mr. Oliphant if that's all right. A couple of things. Over the since 2019, we've been sitting at the table, and Mona made reference to it, the Inuit Crown Partnership table. I think it's very useful, but I think it also has not realized its full potential. And real change is a process, not an event. And so we have to get past events and get into a different relationship in that partnership as described. And so I'd be very much welcome your thoughts on how we can improve that partnership so that we can continue to capitalize on what has been gained, but to grow it.
Thanks. Yes, and as essential members, Bill and Mona, I've really gratefully appreciated your participation and your thoughtfulness in it. So the central premise of the Inuit Crown Partnership Table is that the Government of Canada will always have priorities and Inuit will always have priorities. Let's decide what our shared priorities are and work on them constructively. Let's bring our most challenging issues to the table, and let's figure out how to create work plans that interrupt cycles and set a better course. I think the challenge so far is it's been largely divorced of budget cycles. I think that we have 3 meetings a year, one with the sitting Prime Minister, 2 with the Cernak Minister as the co-chair with myself. If we were to structure our work plans and our deliveries that go into federal pre-budget considerations, then it would also, from a ministerial perspective and a departmental, it would incentivize the further work on the work plans. If you understand that it is all integrated, versus now where we still had very ambitious work plans with no funding to do them, which disincentivizes the work, and then we come back to the table and we get updated on zero to little progress, which has been a challenge. We still are in the early stages, and I also think that just like with some of its outputs, like the Inuit Nunangat policy is a key output of the Inuit, the ICPC table, they need to be shared wins instead of Inuit got this from government. And sometimes it feels like within the public service and within departments, it is akin to consultation rather than true partnership, where that maybe departments enter into with other jurisdictions or with other nation states, which they think very differently about. So we're still at the very early stages of changing the perception of how Indigenous peoples work with the nation state and the shared expectation and outcome that we all share. From our side, we have just as much an obligation to the space as the federal government. And that was what we were trying to interrupt, is the point-in-time investment, the benevolent federal minister flying into our community and announcing something on one day and then getting the kudos for that. So I know that that's something that's central to your leadership as well.
And thank you for that. And I want to acknowledge there are, I think, opportunities to connect that budget cycle to our aspirations. And you've in particular have spoken about ensuring that we invest in marine, transportation, and social infrastructure in Inuit communities in order to foster prosperity, but also to protect our national security interest. And the potential that exists in the significant investment that we've now committed to meet our NATO obligations has a 1.5%, and that's actually a very substantive potential for nation-building investment. And within the, from my own standpoint, within the defense infrastructure, the opportunity to invest in multi-use infrastructure that is informed by the people that live in those communities as to what would work for them as opposed to imposing things upon them. I think there's real opportunity there. The last point, and I'll just grab it quickly, when you make reference to the mobility of people across political boundaries, for the Inuit people across the Nunavut, in both Russia and America and the UK, or excuse me, in Denmark and Greenland, are you referring to the Jay Treaty and Canada's failure to recognize the Jay Treaty, or are you thinking of something beyond that?
A very brief response.
The Jay Treaty is part of it. Inuit, I can travel to the U.S. under the Jay Treaty. I can't come back to Canada under the Jay Treaty, even though it is a bilateral treaty between
Canada doesn't
and the US.
recognize it, and I'm aware of that. So I was asking if that would clarify it.
It's absurd. It is part of the solution.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then we will now conclude with MP Laurie Idlut. You have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Thank you so much. I've been appreciating the line of questioning from my colleagues in this committee. A part of my questioning will be quite partisan, being part of the NDP. We saw, for example, the expedited passing of Bill C-5 without the free, prior, and informed consent of Indigenous peoples. And I heard you clearly that you're expecting governments to have a stronger relationship with Inuit, and you're demanding better respect. And I wonder if you could share your views on what that could look like and how that could have positive impacts for Inuit.
Laurie, first and foremost, for any of the coming up listed projects for the implementation of Bill C-5, if they have any connection to Inuit Nunavut, they must have explicit support of Inuit. That we know that there are dreams and aspirations for all sorts of entrepreneurs and jurisdictions from this legislation, and I can't think of a worse fate than for us to have to then fight some of these new listed projects because there wasn't respect given to Inuit in the process. We have been very clear as Inuit leadership that we welcome the ability to bring Inuit Nunavut into Canada. We have been hoping for this for a generation, perhaps two. The question now is, can we do that together? And I know that we can, but there is another path, and one that is unfortunately something that we have to also just mention, is that in this country's past, our rights are happily trampled on by opportune businesses and governments, and we just can't let that happen today.
Thank you so much. My next question is regarding Arctic sovereignty versus Arctic security. I see that this Liberal government is only focused on Arctic security, only focusing on military defense. Can you elaborate on why it's so important to also balance that out with Arctic sovereignty, where addressing programs like the Inuit Child First Initiative would be so important, helping to eliminate TB. I know that ITK is very important. These are programs that are so important that shows that Canada is willing to invest in Arctic sovereignty.
Yes. As we state wherever we can, Inuit are the human face of Arctic sovereignty for Canada. And that is just a factual statement. The health of our communities, the sustainability of our communities, and the investment in them is an essential feature of Canada's defense strategy and its aspirations to keep its own sovereignty. The funds that the federal government can invest in Inuit communities, which result in healthy communities and safe communities, is essential for the Canadian Rangers. It's essential for all the workers who might be working at airstrips or military bases or marine ports, for those people who are ensuring that governments are functioning. We need to invest in our communities to ensure that we can meet whatever is coming at us with the best possible foot forward. And I don't think it's too much to ask to lower our tuberculosis rate to the Canadian average from the 300 times the rate that we have now, or that we provide just essential services for Inuit children so that they are not discriminated against by being Inuit.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. A very brief question and answer, please.
Yes, very quickly. I had an amazing feedback from a constituent, Jesse Tungilik, who talked about the dangers of only focusing on Arctic security and how that would actually put more women at risk because of military just being flown in to our communities. I wonder if you can speak to that, so that we need to amplify how Arctic security includes keeping Inuit women safe.
A brief answer, please.
This is in the same consideration for fly-in, fly-out natural resource extraction projects, and then the negative impacts on certain members of local communities. And that has to be a consideration, especially considering the murdered, missing Indigenous women and girls, and especially Inuit women and girls, and the need to do more for that population.
Thank you. Thank you very much, President Obed, for your testimony today and for appearing for this important study. That concludes this meeting. Is it the will of the committee to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.